Part 1. The sharp clatter of metal against metal echoed crisply in autopsy room number 3. I was putting the finishing touches on the body of a man in his early 40s. The fluorescent lights reflected off the stainless steel surface of the autopsy table, casting a cold, clinical glow around the long-since-scold cadaver. Cause of death: multiple organ failure due to ethanol poisoning, I stated into the microphone clipped to the ceiling. No signs of external trauma. Autopsy concluded at 11:47 p.m. I peeled off my gloves, removed my blood-stained gown, and tossed them into the medical waste bin. Stepping out of the autopsy room, I noticed the hallway was unnervingly quiet. Rushmore Medical Center usually never slept, not even in the basement, where the morgue was located. My name is Harlen Lee. I've been a forensic pathologist here for 4 years after graduating Boston University with honors and landing a prestigious internship program. My mother is Vietnamese and my father is Chinese American. That's why I have this unique name. Lee, still here. Chief Medical Examiner Schneider's voice came from behind me. Almost, Chief. I just finished the report on the alcohol poisoning case. Schneider nodded, his silver hair gleaming under the lights. Listen, you'll be working with a new intern tomorrow. He's fresh out of school but promising. Think you can show him the ropes? No problem. As Schneider turned to leave, he paused and looked back. Oh, and Lee, don't forget rule number 1. I nodded solemnly. In our profession, there are very strange rules. Not the ones you learn in medical school. Not the ones written in textbooks or standard operating procedures. These are unofficial rules, passed down from one medical examiner to the next, and they exist for a reason. In the changing room, I opened my locker and retrieved my jacket and car keys. Inside the locker door was a yellowed, handwritten note, its ink faded with time. It was the list of rules I'd been given on my first day. Rushmore Morgue rules, *. 1. Never work alone after midnight. 2. Always address bodies by name, never by number. 3. Never look into a mirror in the autopsy room. If you do so accidentally, do not look a second time. 4. Do not respond if you hear 3 consecutive knocks from inside a cold storage unit. 5. If you see blood flowing upwards, leave immediately. 6. Never count the bodies in cold storage unit C17. 7. If you encounter an unfamiliar colleague in the hallway after 3:00 a.m., do not greet them or make eye contact. 8. If someone asks, "Are you still here?" always reply, "I'm about to leave." 9. Never cut red thread if it appears on a body. 10. Never leave the building before dawn if you hear a lullaby. 11. If you find a cadaver with open eyes, do not proceed with the autopsy alone. I read through the rules as a daily ritual. Most of the time, we followed them without truly thinking there was anything supernatural about them. They were just oddities, things treated like superstitions. At least, that's what I used to think. I slung my jacket over my shoulder and glanced at my watch. 11:55 p.m. Still time to get home before midnight. Rule number 1 was always the one everyone took most seriously, even skeptics like me. As I walked through the cadaver storage area, a faint sound made me stop, like dripping water. Drip, drip, drip. Instinctively, I went to check. Maybe a leaky pipe, which could cause problems with the refrigeration system. The storage room was empty, illuminated only by the faint blue glow from temperature displays. I walked along the rows of cold storage units, listening for the sound. Drip, drip, drip. The sound seemed to be coming from the C17 unit, an isolated section for special cases. This area usually only contained unidentified bodies or cadavers linked to serious criminal investigations. I stood before the metal unit door, placed my hand on the handle, then suddenly remembered rule number 6, never count the bodies in cold storage unit C17. I let go and stepped back. Perhaps it was just the refrigeration system. These units were old and sometimes they made strange noises. I told myself that and turned away. Drip, drip, drip. The sound grew louder, and then just as I turned my back, it morphed into 3 distinct knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. Rule 4 echoed in my mind. Do not respond if you hear 3 consecutive knocks from inside a cold storage unit. My heart pounded faster as the knocking repeated, this time louder. Knock, knock, knock. I backed slowly towards the door. Don't answer. Don't open the unit, just leave. As I neared the door, the storage room lights flickered and died, plunging the area into heavy darkness, lit only by the faint blue glow from the displays. And then, from the darkness, a voice spoke, a small voice, as if whispering directly into my ear. Harlen, are you still here? I swallowed hard, remembering Rule 8, if someone asks, are you still here? Always reply, I'm about to leave. I'm about to leave, I replied without turning. Can you help me with something before you go? The voice continued. I need to check something in C17. I gripped the door handle tightly, cold sweat trickling down my spine. I'm about to leave, I repeated, pushing the door open and hurrying into the well-lit hallway, not daring to look back. That was the first time I understood that the rules weren't just superstitions. I couldn't sleep that night, and the next day, things only got worse. Part 2. I arrived at work earlier than usual, my eyes dark from lack of sleep. The events of the previous night still haunted me, but in the daylight, I convinced myself it was just the overactive imagination of a tired mind. Harlen, you look like hell. Julian Metcher, my colleague and best friend here, remarked as I entered the break room. He was sipping coffee from a mug that read, Dead men tell no lies, only secrets. Thanks for the compliment, I replied, pouring myself a thick black coffee. Couldn't sleep last night. Julian raised an eyebrow. Watched a horror movie before bed. Something like that. I didn't want to talk about the knocking. Julian was the type to burst out laughing and think I was delusional. Hey, have you heard? Julian said, whispering into my ear. New staff member starting today and she's a looker. Schneider had mentioned a new intern but didn't specify the gender. I guess he wanted to surprise you. Her name's Freya Keller, fresh out of med school. The break room door opened, and Schneider walked in with a young woman. She had fiery red hair tied neatly back, porcelain white skin, and bright green eyes. Her eyes looked directly at me with undisguised curiosity. Dr. Lee, this is Dr. Keller, our new staff member, Schneider introduced. Dr. Keller, this is Dr. Harlen Lee, who will be showing you the ropes for a while. Nice to meet you, Freya said, extending her hand. I took it, feeling the coolness of her skin. Likewise, I replied, just Harlen is fine. Then I'm Freya, she smiled, revealing a perfect set of white teeth. All right, now that you two have introduced yourselves, Schneider said, I need Harlen to give Freya a tour of the facility and explain our procedures. I nodded and led Freya out of the break room. We began the tour in the lab, where toxicology and DNA tests were performed, then moved to the X-ray room, and finally, the autopsy room. And this is where most of the work gets done, I said as we entered the main autopsy room. We have 3 operating tables, usually active from 8:00 a.m. to 6:00 p.m. After that, only autopsy room number 1 is used for emergencies. Freya nodded, seemingly absorbing every piece of information. What about after midnight? I looked at her, recalling rule number 1. We don't work after midnight unless it's absolutely necessary, and if so, never alone. Why? She tilted her head curiously. I always thought working late at night was quieter. It's hospital policy, I replied vaguely. Safety and procedure. Freya didn't look convinced, but she didn't ask further. We continued the tour to the cadaver storage room. I deliberately avoided the C17 section. This is where we store cadavers awaiting autopsy or transfer after an autopsy is complete, I explained. The temperature is always maintained at 2°C. Freya walked along the rows of cold storage units, reading the labels A, B, C, seemingly organized alphabetically. Where's C17? My heart seemed to stop for a second. C17 is a separate section, I said, trying to keep my voice casual, reserved for special cases. How special? Complex forensic cases or bodies requiring special preservation. Freya nodded, but I saw the curiosity in her eyes. Can I see it? Not today, I said, trying to sound nonchalant. We have plenty of other places to see. We finished the tour in the changing room where I showed her to her locker. Do you have any questions? I asked as I handed her a locker key. Actually, I do. Freya opened the locker and placed her bag inside. I heard there are some unofficial rules here, things not written in the employee handbook. I stiffened. How did she know about the rules? Who told you about that? An acquaintance who works in a Chicago morgue. He said every morgue has its own traditions and rules. I'm curious about the ones here. I deliberated for a moment whether to tell her about the rules. Rule number 1 had saved my life last night, but would Freya believe it? There are a few unofficial things, I admitted. Just good practice habits. For example, always address bodies by name, never by number. Freya smiled, showing respect. I like that. Anything else? Before I could answer, Julian appeared at the door. Sorry to interrupt your romantic orientation session, kids, but we have a new case. He shifted his attention to Freya. Hi, I'm Julian Metcher. Apologies for Harlen's rudeness. He tends to keep pretty people to himself. Freya laughed. Freya Keller, nice to meet you. So what's the new case? I asked, changing the subject. Male, 32, suspected suicide, found in his bathroom with cut wrists. Julian looked at Freya. Sorry if this is a bit direct for your first day. I chose this profession for a reason, Freya said, her voice turning serious. Let's go. I led Freya to autopsy room number 2, where the body had been prepared. We donned our gowns, gloves, and masks, then began the examination. Iden Walsh, 32 years old, I read from the form. Discovered by his wife in the bathtub, deep cuts on both wrists. Freya observed as I began the external examination, noting injuries and signs of death. She appeared confident and composed, seemingly unaffected by the sight before us. What do you notice about the angle of the cuts? She asked, pointing to the cadaver's left wrist. I looked closer. They don't match self.